Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to this collaboration between Women's Football India and the Fanspire. The last time we were on the show, we were talking about India and how excited we were for them in the competition. But today it's absolutely the opposite what we'll be talking about because we are no longer in the tournament. Sadly, it's super sad for the players, for the fans as well, and we're just here to break down what exactly happened and what we can look forward now to. All right, so we have Ullas and Mithila here. Hi guys,
Hey
welcome.
guys. Hey guys. Thanks
Yep,
for
they
having me,
have.
Prem.
Yes, glad to have you. They have really been, following, trying to look up stuff as to what really happened on Sunday when we were all clueless, and most of us were waiting for the lineup, but instead we got really sad news. So, anyone wants to go ahead and talk about what happened on the 23rd?
Yeah, I'll take this because I think so. We actually had a entire viewing party planned, and it's supposed to be a big screening and everything, and we had it all sorted out, right? But it was only very close to the game. I think about a couple of hours from the game that there was a lot of uncertainty because I think a lot of people pointed out that there was barely any communication in the Indian football social media pages because they usually have a lot of line up to the games when the women are walking towards the stadium. They have a couple of live videos that go out. None of that happened. They just had one photo from previous day saying excited for the game tomorrow. How's the Josh or something like that. But that was the only thing, right? So there was a little bit of uncertainty, and everyone started to think that there's probably COVID cases or no. Everyone was really uncertain. There were a lot of whispers going around. Nothing was for sure. And then I think we started getting updates from a lot of people who were in the stadium, like a couple of people who were involved with the media who were in the stadium who were asked to leave, and no one was allowed until 6:30 and a bunch of stuff like that. So I think that's when everyone was like, there could be COVID cases and there isn't any certainty about the game. But even then, throughout the entire process, I don't think we had any communication from any of the official channels. But apart from that, I mean, from what I experienced till 7:30, so most of us had even gathered hoping that there could be some sort of a change, because usually at 6 p.m. the lineups come out, and there was no communication again. But yeah, it was just a whole series of is the match happening, is the match not happening, which just went in circles. And yeah, so here we are. And then we found out at 7:30 when AFC issued a statement saying the match between India and Chinese Taipei will not be played because of the COVID cases and all of that. But yeah, so here we are, no game and discussing about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Same. Even I was just keeping on looking at Twitter, my phone, just waiting for updates. So yeah, as you said, first got an official message from AFC. So, last, what do you think about the communication from both AFC as well as Indian football?
Yeah, so there've been some comments, even journalists who knew about this. So and I said this on a Twitter Spaces session that we knew in the afternoon itself that there was a real concern, and a lot of journalists were informally confirming that as well. That no chance match is going to happen. We have a lot of positive cases and all of that, but nobody could go on record with that because uh, the federation had not confirmed it. They had not issued any directive. At one point, they even asked journalists to leave the stadium, the ones who had assembled there before the game. Um, so even the ones who knew, they couldn't come out and say anything. That was the big challenge. And what we are told, and I don't know to what extent this is true, but what we are told is that there are some stipulations around this. Um, that in such cases AFC has to first come out with a statement, and then it has to be followed by the host federation or the affected federation to confirm later. Now Denerby also effectively said something to that effect today when he said that we had informed them on the morning of the game that we had so many positive cases and we don't have enough players, but they somehow took their own sweet time in issuing a statement or even engaging with us. So that seems to be the problem. In this case, there seems to be the sole assumption that AIFF couldn't have helped it.
Right. Okay, so I think one thing that okay, we'll get to the Denovi interview eventually, because we are going to break it down as well, because I think that's sort of what changed a lot of people's opinions in terms of what's happening. But before that, I think a couple of things about Indian football itself and the statement that they issued. I think it was the president of the AFF, and the statement that he put out saying, the health and safety of the players is extremely important at this point, and we need to protect them, which is true. But alas, I think we do need to talk about the elephant in the room, which is about pointing fingers. uh, and yeah, and I think that sort of caught the eye of a lot of people, because coming from a point of view of the management is supposed to take care of these things, and have all of the tournament organization laid out. If there's any fingers that is going to be pointed, it is going to be on the management, which is what accountability is all about, right? You can't go around telling the players that it's their fault. It's not. And they're right. Like, it's COVID, it could have happened to anyone. But is could it have happened to anyone is the real question, because there were other teams which had positive cases as well. So I mean, compared to, let's say, like a Japan or Australia, which is where the gray area is, and which is where we're not getting any clarity about. What are your thoughts on that, Ulas?
So I think first of all, the statement itself was very poorly worded, because it it didn't focus so much on the problem at hand, and instead try to manage the narrative. That seemed to be the focus of that statement, because it said that the players are heartbroken, and listen, before you blame us, this could have happened to anyone. That seemed to be one of the messages they wanted to put out. And then the second message they tried to put out is that, look, the players are absolutely devastated, so please don't get into any sort of blame game, whereas nobody was blaming the players in the first place, right? um, so there is some inconsistency there, because you ask people not to point fingers, and then exactly a couple of days later you put the head coach out there who goes hammer and tongs at the AFC, and does exactly what your statement was asking people not to do, right? It wasn't an objective press conference, so there seems to be some inconsistency there. But more importantly, to the question you asked, Mithila, um, could this have happened to anyone? I would still say yes, it still could, and it's a tournament. I don't wish it upon anyone, but it just takes, given the rate of transmission we have seen with Omicron, there is a very real possibility that any team could be affected. So we have to concede that, we have to understand that this is something that's a real risk for any team at all. However, some of the statements seem to be a little strange, because if AFC was indeed managing all of this, and if AFC hasn't been testing hotel staff the way Denerby seems to imply, then does this mean that it is just sheer dumb luck that the other hotels and the other teams have not been affected? Or because surely can't be different standards for different hotels. If AFC is doing something, it is doing this in every hotel. If AFC is not doing something, it's not doing it anywhere, right? So we don't know which of the two is true. And to be honest, this is a bit of an AIFF masterclass on subterfuge, something they are very good at. They have always been good at. So that is what concerns me a little bit. And then I already said that, it's just dreadful that you put your head coach, who is most directly affected by it, who is in an emotionally charged space, to address the media, instead of someone with a far more objective take coming out and addressing the media.
Exactly. I think it's again the situation of the people who are in the management taking the accountability for something that was wrong with the management. It's like you're saying the very team which got affected by COVID, which was tested positive, you're basically making them go outside and tell people how we tested positive, when it's practically impossible. I mean, what are they going to say? They're already so affected by the fact that they're not able to do their job, which was to go out there and play. That's it. That's all. That was their job as players, as coaches. That's what their aim was about. They're not worrying about how this was managed and what how things were handled and what happened to the staff, the hotel staff, anything. I think that's why we have a separate management team and an entire player and staff team, right? So I think that's something that still has a lot of inconsistencies. But I think let's take a step back. We'll talk about the player sentiments because I think that's one of the most important ones at this point. I think players like Alti and Daluma have obviously put out their their tweets and everything about how devastated they were and how sad it is, and it is so true. I mean, we're talking about a team which was preparing for the huge such a huge competition for, I mean, ever since the 2019 IWL, I don't think we've had any other talk. Because I mean, one thing is the IWL didn't happen, but of course there was COVID and there are a lot of other reasons around that. But the fact that the entire women's football scene in India was fixated around the AFC, and it was everything was sort of leading up to it. All of the friendlies that they played, their trips to Sweden, their trips to the UAE, every single thing that they did, their trip to Brazil, everything that they did was a preparation for this. So an extremely heavy feeling, and at this point, I don't think anyone can understand the way that they are feeling because nobody went through it. Nobody went through how much the players have put in, how long they've not seen their families. Both the players and the staff, of course. I think even Denapi has put out a statement where he's told them that it's been since last August that he met his family, right? And at this point, because they've tested positive, that they don't even have a way out until they test negative again. So I think it is mentally one of the most taxing things that I've gone through, and my heart goes out to the players and the staff and the entire team that's just out there. So I think huge respect to them, huge props to them for what they're doing. I think the fans are going to continue supporting them. But yeah, Priyanka, Ullas, your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. You've literally covered all of it, Mithila. And the first thing, it's like so heartbreaking. And, to just imagine, put yourself in that place and imagine what they must be going through. And plus, now it's like they have to quarantine, which makes it even more difficult for them being in that situation, just as you said. So, literally, my heart goes out to them. And of course, we're going to be here supporting them through whatever it is because we know how hard they've worked for it. They've really, as you said, they've been away from family, just given it their all. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now, coming down to a little bit more of the technical aspect of what could have happened and all of the articles that were cited by various media sources and a lot of journalists who are writing about it. Ulas, why don't you just take us through a few things in terms of what articles from the AFC were cited? What is the force majeure which the WFI handle had broken down? Because I think it's better we explain it and put it out there so people understand what's going on.
Sure. So the obvious one is that the special rules had a section, an article called 4.1, which said that if you can't field 13 players, including one goalkeeper, then obviously you will be considered to have withdrawn not just from the game but also from the competition, and that is what was first triggered. Um, but after that is where it gets a little interesting because then we come into the competition regulations. Now in the competition regulations, uh, and this is something I'm still not clear about, and this is why I'm so upset about today's press conference by Denerby, because it might have made our case even weaker. Um, in the competition regulations, there is article 6.5, right? In article 6.5 there is a host of penalties listed down for a team that withdraws from the tournament, from the competition. Now, those are very stringent penalties, by the way. Now, one could say that the only event in which these penalties can be waived off if a force majeure is declared. Right, the only body that can declare a force majeure is the Women's Committee, AFC Women's Committee. Now, the AFC Women's Committee, if they declare a force majeure all the penalties listed from 6.3 to 6.6, I believe, are not applicable, which is very cut and dry.
1 second,
But
Ullas, let me stop you right there. I think one small thing that we do need a clarification on is what exactly is a force majeure. So, I mean, I think as far as I understand it, it's something about if there is a circumstance which is unavoidable, right? Or if it's a grave circumstance, like let's say COVID, was COVID cited as that or not? That's the question. So, if you could just clarify a little bit on that.
absolutely. So force majeure quite literally translates to superior power. So it just means that something that is outside of anybody's control, and COVID most certainly, qualifies as a force majeure condition, right? And it's not just here; it's for a lot of sports and a lot of other spheres as well. Um, so there is a force majeure clause. Now, within this, I was saying that in 6.5 there are a lot of penalties, and anything between 6.3 and 6.6 would be cancelled or would be waived off if this is called a force majeure event. But strangely, the penalty that has been imposed on us is 6.5.5, which means that all our results are null and void, even the ones that we have played. And you talked about the players' sentiments. If I could break away from the technical aspects of it for a split second, players' sentiments are also affected by this particular penalty, because you take an example of someone like Sumati Kumari, who made her debut for the senior team. That's null and void. Aditi Chauhan played her 50th cap for the national team. Null and void. She got a clean sheet in that game. We don't know when she will play again, when the next WNT match would be, or when Sumati could get to play again. But these are all important landmarks for the players that were taken away from them, right? Um, Now, anyway, so 6.5.5 said that our results are null and void, points wiped out, no records will be valid. So that gives me that brings me to that question, that why would they impose something so selectively, right? If they have declared force majeure, means all the penalties are waived off. If they haven't declared force majeure, then all of these penalties should apply. And if you read through the penalties, they will send a chill down your spine, because they're very, very, very stringent, right? It also means it obviously means that the matches are cancelled, considered null and void. But in addition, it also means that the team is disqualified from the next edition of the competition. It is also disqualified from participating in the finals, which it doesn't apply to us. It also means that the team will be disqualified from participating in any tournament organized under Article 4.6. Now, I haven't gone through the list of tournaments, but very clear, had we even qualified to the World Cup, we would not have been able to play. Um and then there are more important things, like any subsidy that AFC has given us needs to be returned. 75,000 USD fine. That is another thing. And then the AIFF has to pay for compensation for any damages or losses suffered by other participating member associations, etc., etc. Right. So there are a lot of implications. Now, if it is a question of AFC already having made the decision that okay, we consider this a force majeure event, but just to impose some sort of a penalty, we are imposing only 6.5.5, that is fine. But if they are still mulling over what to do with the rest of the clauses or rest of the penalties, then Denerby has pretty much given them enough ammunition today to come out and be vindictive and really hammer us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think now that we have the right segue into the Dennerby interview, that was pretty much a 360 that happened, right? I think we basically went from don't point fingers, but to, yeah, we're going to point fingers at AFC. We went from, respect the sentiments of the girls, of the staff, and everyone, and we put a staff member right there in front of the camera, in front of the entire media. So I think that is, in my view, I think from what, as fans, as people who play sport, it just shows the uncertainty and the lack of, I don't know, man. I think it's just an entire lack of how you protect the people who work for a certain entity, how much they give their lives for football, and they're just thrown under the bus at this point. Now, I think almost every single as much as everybody would want, everyone is on the side. So I think one thing to be put out there is everyone is on the side of the players and the coach and the coaching staff. In fact, I mean, everybody wants them to succeed, and to watch them succeed is why we're here in the first place. But what they don't agree with is the fact that the very people who are affected by this entire thing are being used to do the work of people who are sitting in behind the scenes, especially things like a media outage, a press conference, anything along those lines. Where is the PR person from AIFF? Is there a PR person from AIFF? What about the media people? Especially, I think one thing that really was, the brink of the point was when Indian football's Twitter handle retweeted AFC's statement on why the India and Chinese Taipei match was postponed at 7:30 p.m., 7:40 p.m. in fact, on the 23rd of Jan, saying "read" with an emoji that points like this. I mean, I wouldn't want to have that kind of a tweet be the first information that I get from from an entity which is basically supposed to tell me exactly what happened, because you have thousands of people waiting and you have the entire lives. And you know what, let's just leave the fans out as well, because they are that selfless at this point. I think the fans just incredible, the people who support in Indian football. It's the players, they're the main characters in this whole thing. You're not doing justice to them, you're not doing justice to their feelings or anything along those lines. So I think it's that entire lack of communication, what everybody was waiting for, just got to everyone, and the Twitter carnage just started from there.
And to add to that, the Samco video that was just released. Yes,
Ulas has a lot to
there,
say about
there's
that.
so much happening behind the scenes that we get a video of Sam Kerr.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, the sheer insensitivity of this whole thing. The AIFF president hides behind a Twitter thread, right? Whereas leaves the coach out to do the press conference. And I already said that, he's not in the right frame of mind. And if you see his choice of words, he's like, "I'm tired. I want to go back to Sweden, take a break." He said, "Our dreams are shattered." Imagine the coach of your national team is saying our dreams are shattered forever. That's just so painful to hear, right? This is a man who's given it all in the last 6 months, and our players have been doing this for even longer. They've been invested in this project for the last 2 years, right? So it's just unbelievable that we should have to put him in such a vulnerable space. That's one. The other part obviously is that where is the LOC? Where are the senior officials of AIFF? Why is the coach having to carry the responsibility of clearing the air? Because the whole premise behind this was that we wanted to address some of the rumors, and that is what I don't understand. That is not the coach's job. Addressing rumors and managing narrative in the media is not the head coach's job. So that was very disappointing. But let's take a look at the cost of all this, right? Uh, it We are in a football ecosystem where the strategy is very event driven, right? So if for whatever reason we rub AFC off the wrong way, and heavens forbid if they come down hard on us and say that, okay, with this press conference you have used up whatever goodwill you had with us, and now we are actually disqualifying you from the next edition. In a football federation, for a football federation that only gets interested in events, imagine having that death sentence on the players, right? The next edition is also not happening. Would you imagine the impact that will have on the development of the women's game in the country? Because let's not forget, even the under 17 World Cup will be played under the shadow of COVID. So we still don't know how that's going to turn out. So for the women's game, this is a very big, this has very severe implications, right? We talk about players Sumati, Mariamal, Shilki, and then
Priyanka.
there was one more, yeah,
Priyanka. Yeah.
Priyanka, right? All these four players, they missed out on the under 17 World Cup, right? And then they also missed out on the Asian Cup. Now if there isn't another event to prepare for, their development is going to be affected big time. So these are these are the implications, these are the consequences of coming out swinging at a time like this when already emotions are running high.
Exactly. Yeah, I think I read a very interesting quote about this exact thing you're talking about. In a system which I think it said in quotes, in a system which heavily depends on a trickle down approach and a top down approach to any sort of development, what do you do when the top gets blown off? Which is so true, which is exactly what happened in this tournament, right? We're talking about such a grand event, such a huge event, and especially an event which we haven't one qualified for in the last few years. So having to prove ourselves against teams, such highly ranked FIFA teams like Japan, South Korea, Australia, all of them, right? Having to play in the same platform as them, one draws eyeballs, and we're also talking about points, right? We're also talking about points to increase our FIFA ranking. There are participation points that are awarded either which way. So I think there are a lot of things apart from just the tournament which we're missing out on, like Ulas pointed out. And I think this is because there wasn't exactly a press conference as much as a coach trying to do damage control that was even given. The especially people, the media, the journalists, the fans, everyone's just left to gather their own information and make their own assumptions like what we're doing right now, by reading our own interpretations of the rules. So none of us actually really know what is going on in terms of what rule is being applied, why a certain rule is applied, was force majeure put in place, or anything along those lines. And this entire lack of clarity is just going in circles at this point. And to see it happening, I mean, I get it that this happens in domestic leagues. We're talking about state leagues and stuff. That's there, but this is an international event. And I think another tweet does come into my mind, talking about the fact that it's an international event. Indian foot, so it in quotes, Indian football should be grateful that it's not, it's not as famous, or it doesn't draw as many eyeballs as cricket does. It is a little bit of a chicken egg story, because it's more like if it did draw that kind of eyeballs, then this sort of an event would not happen. And it's also, if this sort of an event did happen, imagine the carnage, imagine the outrage on especially like primetime news. But we don't make it to primetime news. We should be grateful we don't. And that, and that's the kind of emotion that is probably running around, right? So I think another main thing that we do need to talk about is the path ahead, especially for the girls. We need to talk about that, because the next few months, I think we're looking at the IWL. We're not. I mean, that is still a question. But yeah, Ulas, your thoughts on the future for Indian football?
Yeah, the future is if we can just somehow escape any kind of disqualification by the skin of our teeth, that alone would be a big win, because that would mean that we have something to aim at. We have a project to build again. But looking ahead, I think the most immediate question that probably would arise is that when is the national team going to play next, and who is going to be the coach, because Denerby is now going to go to the under 17 team. So now who takes over, right?
Exactly.
We don't have a permanent head coach for the national team. That's another problem for the federation to solve. Though in retrospect, I think Memol will be very happy. She's nowhere near this circus right now. She'll be quite relieved. Um, but let's hope we make a good appointment there for the head coach. And then the second thing is, as far as IWL itself is concerned, we need a strong-willed management to make it happen, because we heard that it was earlier scheduled for March, and now they're saying that maybe it will get pushed on to April,
Okay.
because quite a few state leagues are struggling to finish their leagues. Delhi, Goa, Maharashtra. I think there's a couple more, right? Manipur is still going on. So all of these state leagues need to conclude, and then there are a few other states who have only done 2021 edition of their state leagues. 21-22 edition has not happened. So in that case, how's their inclusion going to be considered? That is another open issue that needs to be resolved. But we just hope, a lot of promises were made that there'd be more teams, it will be a longer calendar for IWL. We just hope that that is actually true and the federation is still committed towards it, and that we get to see a fair competition there, because that is up along with the nationals. Now that we are not going with an event focused preparation along with the nationals, IWL is the only real scouting opportunity for the national team, right? So whoever the new coaches, they would be very interested in seeing the IWL, or so I hope, uh, to actually pick their squad.
We do have a few questions which have come in from the viewers. Should we go ahead and take them? Okay, so we have two related to Praful Patel.
Do talk about Praful Patel's tenure. Look, uh, yes, there is a lot of uh, lot of controversy around his tenure, and there's a lot of gray area in general in general around the appointments in AIFF. And to be honest with you, uh, a lot of people only notice Praful Patel, but there are certain other very sketchy characters as well, right? So it's I don't think that is quite topical, and that is not something we can predict, or that is, yeah, we know it is wrong. The tenure should have ended a long time ago, and it hasn't. All of that is fine. I mean, what can we do about it, right? There doesn't seem to be a system of accountability. We are a country where there isn't even a proper registered players association. For example, FPAI exists, but AIFF doesn't recognize it, right? So in such an ecosystem, to talk about one individual is sort of pointless. I think everything comes down to this system that is designed to evade accountability, as we saw with the press conference today. So it is not just that replacing Praful Patel will somehow magically solve our problems. It will not. I can guarantee it. No matter who you put there, the system is designed such that whoever comes in, they will end up making the same mistakes, and they will end up, the history will continue to repeat itself. So honestly, yeah, an individual, Praful Patel is one person. It really doesn't interest me to talk about his tenure, or to comment on that. It is wrong. We all know that it is wrong.
And Vinith asked, everyone wants to know, the guys on top in the AFF, should they have some kind of football experience to be handling this sort of thing?
A lot of people have a lot of experience in football. It's not that they don't have it, which is why I said that there are characters there. Uh, and again, I think to run an organization, it takes a mix of both. There seems to be this completely misplaced assumption that put a bunch of footballers in the association and problems will fix themselves. It's not true. uh, Running an organization requires capable administrators along with people who have extensive knowledge of the sport. It has to be a good balance of both. I think the one thing we should be learning from, taking away from this, and the one thing we should be really investing in, is to develop structures that support women's football. For example, the women's committee, which is nothing more than a glorified event management group, right? And that needs to change. You have to really empower them. It's not that they don't want to, but they haven't been empowered enough for them to make a true difference. So I think that is where the change should start from, and they should have their own charter. They should, which is independent of events. Event preparation can have its own LOC. That's fine, but as far as development of the women's game in the country is concerned, the women's committee really needs to be strengthened and empowered to do that.
Yeah. I think both of you guys have made some really good points, and these are things that our Indian fans should know about, honestly, because as you said, right, they try to change the narrative, and we've seen that successfully happen to a vast majority of the Indian fans. Not a lot of people out there actually know what's happening, know what's behind the scenes. I hope after this discussion, you actually, get to know the things that are happening, and we can hopefully use our voices on social media to get something done, because the players are bearing the brunt of this at the moment, the players and staff as well. So, yeah, and I think we can take one final question. How do we move on? Like, after this has happened, I,
I
I'm not
mean,
really thought of it. How do we move on? Like,
I think everyone's a little bit in the process of moving on, and everyone has different things of what they're moving on from. I mean, for fans, I think it's just the fans who've always been there. They're never going to stop supporting the women's game.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen. The more competitions there are, the more local leagues there are. There is just going to be continued support even through those. I think the next big event that we are potentially looking at is the Under 17 World Cup, right? So whether it's an event or a domestic league, I think the idea is to generate the fan culture from a local league, whether it's like maybe like let's say for an example a Gokulam, right? Now there are a lot of people in the state itself who follow the club, and similarly for women's football right now, Setu FC is also coming up in terms of the support alone. I'm just talking about the fan engagement, right? Of course, there are teams across the country which do the same thing, and it shouldn't just be that you're just there for one of those one shot big events, and then you say you see nothing happening, and then you just disappear, right? It's about actually learning about the culture of the sport, learning about what happens, learning about, and eventually getting into the system of it and how everything works, because that's sort of the local leagues are where everyone's built, where the entire structure of the women's entire women's football structure is. So I think one is the women's leagues, more competitions. I think those answers will never change, like in terms of a long term plan. But yeah, and in but if you're talking about moving on, I think because the people involved, like the players and the staff, I don't think anyone is in a place to tell them how to move on or to look for a brighter tomorrow, which they eventually will. But it's especially in a situation where they're already affected. It's you can only give them that kind of reassurance, but you can't demand that out of them. It has to run its course.
Absolutely. But I also think that we are in a very precarious position right now. And I don't mean to be an alarmist, but we are in a very difficult position because if you look at the senior team, um, we are a team with very few replacements in the squad, right? You take out a Bala Devi, there is no real replacement. Maybe we are hoping Manisha will develop into that replacement, but we don't know if she will. Right, at least at this point, she is no match for Bala. And hope we are all uh, betting on the fact that she'll develop as a player. You look at Sangeeta Basfur in her absence. We tried Martina, but it didn't work, and then we found out we don't have a replacement. Right, in the centre back position, we literally only have Sweetie and Asha, and then maybe Manisa. Three real centre backs. We don't have a replacement for Dalima's position at right back. No real convincing options there. We have a makeshift player at left back in Sanju. Um, and then we have the under 17 group, and so much of our resources have gone to such a small pool of players. So if you look at where Indian women's football is headed, it's a slightly worrying scene right now, because if for whatever reason we don't have a lot of tournaments, uh, we will not be able to develop a pool of players. And the reason being that we were so focused on the Asian Cup and the Under 17 World Cup, we almost lost sight of the fact that a lot of state leagues have stopped happening. A lot of local football has completely dried up. A lot of age group football across men's and women's football has not happened ever since COVID started. So there is a genuine big gaping hole in the pipeline of talent that we have in the country. And because of that, if we don't have a tournament or any meaningful calendar ahead, we will continue to fall further behind in Asia itself. Forget World Cup and all. Within Asia itself, we will continue to fall behind. And it has been pointed out several times that our team is now struggling to beat the likes of Bangladesh. Right. So it's not a very pretty picture. So I really hope that as far as the way forward is concerned, we really invest in structures, age group football, and develop a nice pathway. We keep blaming clubs for this, but you look at what has happened. Gokulam has invested in women's football, but if you look at the Gokulam squad, much of their superstar players have been imported from outside, right? We need teams that are developing local players and are picking and scouting players from the community around them, or the city they are from, or at least the state they are from, for which Karnataka has created a sort of template that you need to have at least 8 local players in your teams and all of that. So I think that is where our focus should be. But as far as moving on itself is concerned, I don't know how to move on from this, because it's been 3 days and I'm still quite bummed about this. So maybe in the next few days we will have newer things to outrage over, and maybe this will seem like a lesser thing to outrage over. But as of now, I really don't know how to move on from this debacle, because it's just too sad. It's just absolutely
Yeah.
sad. And Denerby's comments just literally broke me, because it's so uncharacteristic to see a man who is otherwise completely in control come out and say that our dreams are crashed. So yeah, it's sad.
Yeah. And considering that we should have played today. That was another thing. I mean, we should have done. I mean, today I would have ideally liked to do a post-match review and just have fun and talk about how the team was and do what we love to do. But we're having to do something that none of us wanted to do. So I mean, yeah, it's just a place where we're at right now.
Literally, we can all just be hopeful that things turn around. We keep saying this when we talk about women's football. We have this issue and that issue, and just something bigger pops up, just like I said. So I
The
think
women's development strategy in this country is just optimism, misplaced optimism. That is the strategy to develop the women's game in this country.
yeah, definitely a good discussion with both of you. To the people watching, if you do have any more questions and comments, please let us know. Ulas and the people at Women's Football India have done a brilliant job at breaking it down. You just heard him. He's broken down the rules, the things with the AFC. So please do go head over to Twitter, check it out, learn something about what's actually happening. And yeah, we'll be back hopefully with some more things to talk about Indian women's football soon, and some positive things hopefully.
Yeah,
All
for
right.
sure. I think Ulas had a fantastic breakdown of all of the articles and everything. It actually gave me a lot of clarity as well.
Same,
But
same.
yeah, I think other than that, it was a fairly good discussion. Hope we got all of our points out there, and yeah, hopefully better tomorrow.
Great, great,
Thanks, Vinny. Thanks for listening in.
great stuff.
Cheers.
So yeah, thank you for tuning in. As I said, do go and follow Women's Football India on Instagram, Twitter, and also do subscribe to the Fans Bar. We'll look to get more content like this. Uh, Great to see these positive comments as well. Thank you so much for joining in. We'll be back soon. Thanks, Last. Thanks, Mithila, and good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Was a
guys. Good
pleasure.
night.
See you.